Welcome to Innovations in Leadership, a Success League radio production. This is a podcast focused on customer success and the leaders who are designing and implementing best practices in our field. This podcast is brought to you by the Success League, a consulting and training firm focused on developing customer success programs that drive revenue. My name is Kristen Hayer, and I'm the host of Innovations in Leadership and the founder and CEO of the Success League. And today I'm joined by Ryan Anderson, who's the Senior VP of Client Success for MedInsight Milliman. We're going to be talking about how his team has leveraged insights and advice from third parties to refine their customer success approach. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Kristen.
So Ryan, it seems like everyone in our field has a different path into customer success. How did you land in this field?
Well, I started many years ago at Milliman in the role of client success person before there was client success discipline.
What did they call you?
I think I was a technology consultant at that time.
Okay.
And we had a product that we support, and the role was helping to tailor that product with the clients and their needs. And so I like to say that I got here through that work, and I think that I was relatively good at it. And so I was able to help clients succeed. And so as the discipline was sort of invented over the past number of years, it made sense for us to also embrace the client success way of doing things within our organization. And so as the person that started that area of support, it naturally rested with me. And so I was a bit more of an operational person at the time that I made that transition, but my roots are in pleasing people and helping them succeed with what they're doing with us.
That's great. So just for a little fun, as we were prepping for this interview, my dog visited my office. I have a 4-year-old German Shepherd. If any of you have seen me on webinars, you've seen a picture of her behind me on my wall. And you mentioned that you trained German Shepherds for a period of time. This is a little off topic, but you had mentioned to me that training German Shepherd dogs influenced your management approach. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
It did. It actually influenced my management and child rearing and coaching when I used to do that. It's actually had a much bigger impact than a person might think. But the tenet of good dog training, and especially complicated dog training, where you're training dogs not just in obedience, but tracking and then protection work, it's a lot. And they have to learn a lot. And you can't do it by running ahead and just training the end. You have to have building blocks along the way. And it's been very interesting to see that very same concept come up in management books and articles that you read. And it's essentially, you just want to break down the work into units that you can achieve and keep achieving, and you grow the momentum of the training and of the change. And it doesn't force you to do too much change at once. You can take it in bite-sized portions, which is less disruptive, whether it be for your client base or your internal staff. It's helpful to take things in managed little portions like that, rather than trying to boil the whole ocean.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. So I wanted to make sure we touched on that as part of your background. Tell me a little bit more about MedInsight Milliman. What does your organization do, and how is customer success set up on your team there?
As I mentioned earlier, we do have products, and one of those, the flagship product, is called MedInsight. And MedInsight itself is a large data aggregation tool, decision support system. And we also have other ancillary products that add value to healthcare data, and we work primarily in the healthcare space.
Okay.
And as we set up our client success in that light, much of what we do is actually not just the product that we have, but the service that we provide. Because healthcare data is so complex and wide-ranging, it takes constant watering and feeding when it comes to the care of that data. And so while our product is outstanding, we also have the need to have consultative work along with that. And so that really is the connection point of our client success strategy, is through our client-facing staff that partner with our clients to help make sure that their use cases and their needs for this wide variety of data can be met.
Got it. Okay. So today we're going to talk about leveraging third-party help when you're building out your customer success program. What kind of help have you sought in the past?
Most of the help that I've got up until fairly recently was through books and
Okay.
articles. And then, as I always tell people, when it comes to these books, there's a lot of common sense that goes into it. And if you step away from yourself for a moment and think about the relationship from the client's point of view, it really gives you so many of the answers that you're looking for, what you need to worry about, what you need to do. And so I guess I always feel like I've been in a client success role because I've always thought that way. I knew the best way to get a compliment was to help make something easy for somebody else. And so I found that to be an easy transition from my point of view when it comes to doing that. And so I had all these ideas, I read all these articles, but I'm also the type of person that training as a chemist that I don't want to just think what I think. I want to verify it. And one of the nice ways of doing that is to use a third party. And I like to just call it to check on the truth. I just want to make sure that we are changing the right things, or we are focused on the things that are going to be important to our clients or to our success in providing them success. And so I found, I've been very pleasantly surprised and over excited probably about the help that we've gotten from a few outside vendors just to come in and talk with us and take our history and our feelings, so to speak, away from the equation so that we can really just look at it in a more scientific manner. And so for somebody like me, that's a terrific way to do it. And so it's really been a pleasure to work with these companies.
That approach makes sense, especially now that I know about your background in science. So I always like a data-driven approach, so that resonates with me a lot. So why have you chosen to use third parties? What were the major drivers for your organization?
Well, there's a few things that pop into my head. One is I just wanted to make sure that I was on the right track. As I was bestowed the title of SVP of Client Success, I thought, well, I better get this right. It's literally my job. And so I wanted to make sure that I was doing things in the correct manner, and I wanted at least a check on the direction that we were taking. And so that was just a solely personal reason that I was excited about using it. And I also know that change, it can be hard, and change can be hard in a couple of different aspects. One is internal, like the client-facing staff are what we call our client success managers. And I can tell you from our history is that those people are rated very highly by our client base. And our clients love working with them, not because they're perfect all the time, because if something happens, they're going to get it fixed, they're going to get on it. And so we've always had such great feedback, like, you guys do this, you guys are so awesome, your client success reps are awesome. And when you have a group of people that is getting feedback like that, and then you talk to them about potentially changing what they do, they rightfully scratch their heads and say, wait a second, are you not listening to what the clients are saying? They love us. We have unbelievably high retention. We have great, as I said, great feedback about our client-facing staff. And so what's nice about using a third party is you're able to come in and say, we're not changing what you do, and we don't want to change those things about you that make your clients feel that way. We want to potentially structure it a little differently, like the mechanics of it will be different. You don't have to be different, but your mechanics might be. Or we might want to measure something differently than we did in the past. And so it gives you a little bit of cover as far as helping to implement change with a group of really successful people already. And that, at least in our situation, I would think it would be much easier if you were getting poor scores and you don't need any cover. But when you have a group of overachievers that are doing very well, it's very helpful in that light. Additionally, it's nice to get that same check-in both for myself and also for the ownership group or the senior leadership teams, that we want to give a third-party assessment. We want to give a no-load look at what we're doing and how it's set up. And it's also helpful when it comes to client success. There aren't a lot of, in a scientific method, there's not a lot of dollars that I can point to that say client success led to X dollars. That's a really hard measurement to make in client success. You can look at retention, you can look at satisfaction, you can look at those things. But translating that into for a group of investors or a group of people that want to invest money in a program or a project, you want that it's third-party coverage to a certain degree to help explain what's going on in other companies, what's going on in your own company that's good, and what you could work on to help make that better. And I think that those leverage points that hit the inside, the team that works with clients as well as the management level folks at your organization, those are two really critical points that you really need to have on board. And upper management, if you don't have upper management, as you well know, if upper management isn't saying client success things, it's not going to work. And if people don't think that there's anything that they can help improve upon, it's not going to work. And so helping to tell that story, not from the person that's critiquing necessarily, but a partnership of, hey, we're here to help make it better. And so the variety of things that I mentioned, all of those things were super beneficial when it comes to utilizing third parties, especially when you're starting something up, because, if you're being honest with yourself, you want to make sure that you're off and setting it up and starting it in the correct fashion and before you get too far along.
Yeah. And, something you just said kind of resonated with me, because I think the other thing too, and tell me if you agree with this or not, because it's your scenario as well, but I've been in a situation where I've kind of grown up inside of a company, and sometimes you have less credibility. They're like, well, you used to be the sales rep, and like, how do I know that you're actually, not just making this up?
Right.
And so, I think it can help with credibility. Do you ever run into that?
I don't think that I do, but then again, I might not know. There might be people that don't find credibility in it. But I would say this: I mean, if I were to be, if I did encounter a credibility issue, I wouldn't have a strong leg to stand on to argue in the opposite. I think that I'm reasonably intelligent, and I can pick up the concepts and things like that. But the truth is, I haven't done it for a long, long time either. And so, if somebody were to question that, like, well, I know that, you were a chemist, and then you were more on the technology side and operational in the past, it would be a valid question. And so having others espouse the exact same things that I've been saying when it comes to the overall picture of client success, I think it's a very institutional characteristic. It's the way a lot of it is. You really get the benefit if you start to hear people talk differently.
Yeah.
Sometimes having professionals that do just client success, like I said, we're working with healthcare providers with healthcare data, and that's what we're expert with.
Right.
Client success and setting up client success programs is not our business. And so while I might, like the client success managers, I might think I'm doing a great job, I'm sure there are things and blind spots that I have that others might not. And so, like I said, I don't recall bumping into anybody not believing me, but if I did, I would understand that. And this is certainly one of the ways to easily combat that, is bring in, like, I'm working with a professional that this is all they do. All they care about is setting up client success programs correctly. And so that's really easy, because that person is very hard to disagree with when it comes to the structure and things like that.
Yeah. I think it kind of compounds, because, you might be, newer to customer success, and then customer success is newer to investors and to senior leaders. And it's getting better. I mean, in the 6 years that I've been running this company, it's definitely gotten much more widespread, but it's still something that not every field is very comfortable with. And I think you're in a field where customer success or client success is still less common. I can see how having third-party support would be really helpful for your senior leadership team too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go down into some details. So you have a large organization that's spread out across a number of regional offices. How has using third parties helped you bring your teams and different departments together?
I think the answer to that is very similar to the previous question, really, in that it's going to bring extra credibility. It helps to lessen or soften the message to a certain degree, because when managers say something, it has a different connotation than somebody suggesting it in a different, that I don't have a history with, and I don't have, performance reviews with, that I know I've got to listen in a different way. And so bringing those different offices together, again, I mean, I don't want to say that we struggled, but because we didn't, but we have a situation where we've had these satellite offices that very much were independent. But the one thing that I always noticed and I knew to be true was all of them are doing a terrific job of client success the same way that I used, and the same as as they've all done. And so they have very high ratings when it comes to their clients. All of our offices did, and all of our offices had super high retention. And so all of those same things still were in place. And it was very helpful for me because, again, it's a group of very highly successful and achieved high success at what we asked them to. And so it's very helpful to have somebody come in and take the sting out of that a little bit. I think that it softens the message, because I'm certain that people, third-party vendors that are working in that space, are encountering that. It would be interesting. I'm certain that, you and your organization probably face credibility issues. You're kind of proving, try to prove yourself or prove your resume, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Just like the rest of us are. And so I knew my resume wasn't good enough for everybody. And I wanted to bulk that resume up and say the message, it's not just me and the few books I read. It's me, the books I read, and I've got some professionals behind me that are helping to fill in the gaps that I might not explain well enough, or things like that, and help see our blind spots. It's very beneficial.
Yeah, that's great. Could you share one or two specific examples of how you leverage data or advice to make some concrete improvements in your program?
Yeah, in fact, before we called it client success, we were contracting and continue to contract with an organization that does specific outreach and has conversations with our client base. And they do that amongst people that aren't our clients in the same space as well. And so they do a terrific job of working in the healthcare area when we're talking about vendors and software providers. And so we've used their survey results as our client success North Star, so to speak, as far as what we're working on. And so we've been using them, like I said, before we even started saying client success in a meeting. And so we've identified it. And going back to my science background, one of the things that I loved about it was scientific. That they've got metrics on things like delivers technology, or keeps promises, or executive involvement, things like that. Like, there's different areas that we could focus on. One of them was training. And I'll use training as the example because it used to be rated very poorly. Well, it was because we had done it kind of as an afterthought. And once we started seeing, I don't want to say it as an afterthought, that sounds bad, but we didn't realize the importance that training had until we started seeing those scores. And the first thing we did was we went out and hired a professional with experience that has set up training and education programs. And I can tell you that within the past few years, it's incredible, the difference. And what's beautiful about that is we've set up a great training and education program. It is really, people are just raving about it. All of our clients are raving about it. And what's even better is that our metric when it comes to education is going up, and we can see the results. And so again, even though these are all things that we now know about and we're all trying to improve upon things, I really like that objective point of view from the clients without us in the room, so that if anything bad needs to be said, it can be said. Because like I said, we actually had a hard time getting that information from our clients because of the dedication and hard work that our client-facing staff exhibits.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's hard to say, I don't really care for Joe Schmo because of something else, when Joe Schmo is like, he just worked 20 hours this weekend to help pull something off. And so I don't want to say anything bad. And not that we were looking for bad things, but we just really did want to know the truth. And we wanted to know what are some things that we can work on, because we want to make them better. And so from that perspective, to gather information about our clients, which we are also doing, but gather, like I said, objective, conversational information and data from our clients has been through the roof valuable, because we just take the lowest things on the rating scale, and that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to fix this year. We're going to make it better this year. And I've been terribly proud and happy about the success that we've achieved internally when it comes to doing a better job of listening to our clients through this third-party vendor that I'm referencing.
That's so great. I mean, this kind of gets into my next question, which, it may be a different example, but how has the use of third-party partners helped you elevate the experience that your customers are having with you?
Well, I mean, that's exactly right. It's, and staying on the education track, or the education data point, it was absolutely clear to us that what we were doing, which we thought was good enough, was not. And in fact, it just wasn't. And so we said, all right, we're listening and we've got a good data point, and we came up with a plan to improve upon it. And so, like I said, giving us those North Stars, if you will, or giving us those targets is super critical. And again, I've got a group of people that every metric I've ever looked at them, it's like, well, they're all killing it. They're doing great. What aren't we doing great? It's like, we don't know what we don't know. And so having somebody that's going to touch all the bases, so to speak, and check in on them, it's just been so critical for us to give us both an initial look as well as giving us a report card on what we had done. Once you see it, that's one thing, and then actually affecting change on it and having that same organization do the study allows us to look over time, are we changing it in the context of our client base as well as against the industry at large. And so those two measurements, are we getting better in our clients' eyes? And that's truly client success. That's great. Yeah. And then we've also got we can't pretend like we're living in a bubble and our current clients are the only ones we care about. And so looking at seeing what other companies, how they're being rated in that regard as well, helps us to say, well, this might not be our lowest thing, but somebody else might have this, they're knocking it out of the park, and they're getting a lot of partnerships with new clients from it. And so, we better make that better too. So it's very beneficial to help us see potential things that we need to improve upon.
Yeah. And I think there's different kinds of tools like the one you're describing in different industries, but I know the one that you're talking about has both quantitative and qualitative feedback from the customers. And so I'm sure you've probably gotten some good qualitative feedback too.
Absolutely.
On improvements to the training.
It's very beneficial because two people can see one number and think the reason behind it is totally different. And that for us was very helpful because we had quotes from real customers that helped explain that number. Like, oh, I thought it was because of, we dropped the ball on this. And that I was thinking about it totally differently. And as you well know, one of the key tenets of client success is thinking about it from their point of view. And so having their actual words and the qualitative, as you mentioned, the qualitative information, it's so beneficial to really get out of your own head and get into the head of the person that you're really trying to help.
That's really cool. So how did you go about choosing the various third-party vendors you've ended up working with?
There's always a variety of ways that you meet vendors and people. Some of those, somebody from sales knew somebody, and then you meet them. And I would say that our focus was looking at companies with a track record that had some measure of success that they could tout and espouse, kind of like what we do with our clients.
Yeah.
And you do look at the different organizations that they've worked with and things like that. There was really one organization when it came to the quality, the research and the individual client interviews that we do. There's really they put out a report every year and it's very visible. And so that would be another way that I would consider selecting a vendor is, do they already have a platform that people are listening to?
Right.
And, in particular, if your clients are listening to that platform, well, that's a really good one to use because then you're dialed in with, if you can rate very highly on what they're measuring, it's going to look really good to your client base as well. And so trying to partner with somebody as much as you can in the same industry. But as you mentioned, client success is not long-standing within the healthcare realm. And so that wasn't always possible when we're looking at getting help with client success. But it is one of the measurements or one of the thoughts that we go through as we are stacking up different vendors.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So how did you go about getting your other teams in the company on board with the vendors that you chose and getting comfortable with what they were bringing to the table?
Well, I think that I have to say that I relied a lot on the vendor. And the reason being, they have money to make. And so they're very well motivated to make sure that this message comes across correctly. And so, again, I always felt as though I didn't do a great job selling it. And I still do, because I don't consider myself a terrific salesperson. And I look at the initiatives like the sales team was doing, and those went through flying. They would fly right through. I'm like, these salespeople are way better at selling than I am. Who would have thought it, right? And so personally, I like to leverage the third party to help me sell it and to help to create the proposal, because I can off the cuff kind of explain to you in an elevator pitch what we're going to do. But when it comes to investors and or other offices and people like that, you don't really want an elevator pitch. You're talking about institutional change. And so we're not going to just talk about that for 60 seconds and then everybody runs off and does something. You want to have something a little bit more formal. And I like, again, the expertise of client success organizations that are purposely trying to help you with your client success program or with your client success data. Those companies are going to understand the value and be able to speak to the value better than I can right now. And so I found, again, as a new industry, as somebody that's fairly new in that discipline, that was very beneficial to me because, again, I'm going to sell it once to my team or to my investors. You guys sell it every single time you make a proposal.
Yeah.
So I think that you're probably, just based on the amount of practice that you get, you're going to be much better at it than I am. And that kind of gets back to what we were talking about earlier, which is let the professionals and the experts be professionals and experts in what they do. And I just considered vendor selection. I wanted them to help sell themselves in that same manner because I knew that would be more effective than me doing it.
So if someone in the audience is considering looking for outside help and advice, what advice would you give to them, in terms of helping to formulate their thinking around that?
I'm not sure it's the direction that the answer was intended, but one thing I think that is critical is to have some measure of buy-in. And I think that before you even start to look for a vendor, regardless of what it is, I think that you want to have some sort of buy-in. And I mentioned this before because there's not numbers that you can really talk about necessarily. It's a lot of theoretical and it's a lot of strategy of how you're going to interact with your clients. That's client success. And I think that you want to make sure to have buy-in from your executive team. And the biggest thing that I always worry about is and I read this in a book, I should give credit to it, but I can't recall the name of the book, but it's what's called situational commitment. And you don't want to have everybody, when you talk about client success, everybody's going to be for it because you can't possibly be against it. We're going to make things easier for our clients. They're going to love us more and they're going to want to do more with us. Well, who wouldn't want that? Everybody wants that until that one client comes along or that one scenario comes along where we're actually going to do something contrary to the client success principles that we had agreed upon. And it really can gut the strategy and it can really stop it in its tracks, because as soon as that starts to happen, as soon as you have a leak in the dam, so to speak, everybody's thinking that it's not really what we're doing anymore, because here's an example of once real life hit us, we didn't do it. And so I think that that's very important. I think it's very important to get that agreement and really challenge people and say, this is going to be different. We are going to think differently. We're going to talk with our clients differently. You have got to be on board with that or I will never succeed. I probably bored the executive team by saying that many times, but it was very important to me because I really didn't want to have any self-inflicted wounds to our progress. And that was very important to me to have that in place. Once that's in place, and I could tell it was in place because I could hear the language of our organization changing. And that was a great indicator to me that not only did they agree with it, I can see that they agree to it. I can hear that they agree with it. They were saying things like proactive services. They were saying, we want to answer our clients' questions before they even ask them. These are big things that I was touting as part of our client success strategy, the place that we wanted to go. And I started to hear that and I thought, oh, they're really ready for everything, because now they're talking about it in speeches. They're talking about it in presentations to our staff and or to our clients. And they are believing in it. They're seeing the benefits. They're seeing the things that we have accomplished, the small measures that we've accomplished before then. And so I knew they were ready to make an investment in it, to make a further investment in it that was outside of our organization. And so for me, that was the biggest key. And then, like I said, when it comes to the individual selection, it was just really important to me that I could have somebody that I recognize the logos, because that just makes you feel better.
Yeah.
and or they work directly in our, had a lot of experience in our industry. And those are the two things that I thought. And then, just like any other organization that you work with, you're going to want to make sure that they're financially, stable and things like that, that you're not entering a partnership with somebody that might not be there tomorrow. So those really relate to any vendor. And so as I kind of think being in the industry, like, everybody probably does that anyway, but that is one of the easy metrics or data points I try to adhere to.
Great. Last question. This is one that we like to ask all of our guests because it's a chance for you to talk about something other than this topic we've been talking about, third-party people who provide advice and help and data. So what do you see as the biggest trend in customer success today and why?
Well, I would have to say, I think the biggest trend in customer success is customer success as the trend. And I actually think that its adoption is really going through every industry and not just the one that I work in, but it's becoming a common vernacular across lots of different industries, whether they be service or not. And as I mentioned, these are a lot of the things that you do in client success. And, one of the things we try to do is make it easier for you to do what it is you need to do. I've always thought that way. And so it's very interesting to me to see a discipline built around that my mom and dad must have instilled it in me or whatever. But it's been very interesting to me to see that discussed in a manner that you talk about organizational change and you're doing it for that reason. And I just think that when you boil it all away and you think to yourself, how am I going to be successful selfishly? And the answer is everybody that works with you, if you can make them successful, if your partners are successful, you're going to come along for the ride. And that's really the important part that I really enjoy seeing it. It's very interesting to watch it happen across, like I said, many industries, is that the focus has shifted from how do we make money to how do we create success? And it's a beautiful conversation to have with a client. And it's such a better conversation to have with the client. And so I really do believe that the trend itself is that it's so popular and it has such momentum. And I don't perceive that it could possibly go away. Once your clients taste what it's like to have a real partner that's thinking it, from their point of view, they're never going to accept anything less than that. And I really do feel that it's a much better partnership. It frames your conversations better for internal as well as external. It helps you focus on the things that really do matter. And that's the wonderful part of seeing this spread around, not just to my organization, but to many organizations and even competitive organizations. I think, I don't want to overblow it, but it makes for a better world.
It really does. And, it's funny because one of the classes that we teach, we say, when you're working with your customers, they're not comparing you to your competitors. They're comparing you to the best customer experience they've ever had. Yep. And if you really think about that, the bar is continually being raised on what a great customer experience is. And we all have to keep up with that. And that is customer success. So it absolutely is spreading. It's been really exciting, actually, to be, kind of leading the charge in this field for 6 years and to see the giant shift that has happened just in that pretty short period of time, from me having to explain to CEOs what customer success is to now whole organizations making the shift toward a customer-centric organization and going through the change that entails. And it's really exciting to see. So
yes,
thank you for bringing that one up.
Yeah.
So Ryan, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today. I know our audience will be excited to hear your take on using third parties and your ideas on trends in the field and German Shepherd dogs. So I can always talk about German Shepherd dogs. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. And so if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is probably my email, which is ryan.anderson@milliman.com. It's ryan.andersen @Milliman, MILLIMAN.com. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And it was a pleasure to talk about this. And I'm looking forward to hearing it as well as others.
Thanks again, Ryan. I also want to thank our sponsor, the Success League. To learn more about the Success League's consulting and training offerings, please visit our website, thesuccessleague.io. For more great content, follow the Success League on LinkedIn or at TSL Customers on Twitter. Success League Radio focuses on customer success and features book reviews, author and customer success leader interviews. And you can subscribe to that on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. Finally, thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time.